All right, we're going. I'm here with Ashley Murray, who started Hoosiers for Medical Liberty. And so, Ashley, a lot of people know your story about you were at a faculty class, you planned on leaving, you thought you'd be to death. You called a friend and said, "Hey, I'm really into this. I'm going to cancel." What I want to know and start with is what were you like 2 years earlier than that? How would you describe your life politically a couple years ago?
Yeah, that's a really long story, and I don't know if we have time for it, but it goes something like this. Nothing. I was not political at all. My husband would turn on the TV and he'd be watching something that was related to politics, and I'd yell at the TV a little bit, and then I would just throw my hands up and walk out because I am not the type of person to invest myself in something that I don't believe that I can make an impact or change. And from the best of my knowledge at that time, it was futile. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I'm a very direct person. I don't like to mince words. Uh, if I'm thinking it, you're probably going to hear it because my filter just, wasn't ever really formed in the womb. So, um, just a very, very direct. I don't like to play the games, and that's all I saw with politics. Name calling. That's just not my style. Like, let's just have a good conversation. Let's work this out. And that's not what I saw. So I didn't deal with it because it wasn't worth my time.
So,
So
how did you get to that faculty class last year?
yeah, so I have been in awareness of some of the issues with the vaccine situation and how there really isn't a conversation. It's an argument, and you have to pick a side, and this, that, and the other. And we no longer vaccinate our children. We stopped about 6, 7 years ago. And I was quiet about it because of the fact that I'm a nurse, and nurses don't go against vaccinations, and it has a lot of negative repercussions, and this, that, and the other. Well, as I continued to work in healthcare, I kept on seeing issues with healthcare in general, not necessarily so much with vaccinations, but I slowly kind of worked myself into a different position, and felt like I could actually care for patients. And then when my youngest was born, she ended up having a lot of issues and open heart surgery and all this stuff. And I really did a lot of research with the vaccines. And it was very difficult for me to sit in that NICU and understand how we could vaccinate this very fragile child with the abundance of information out there that did not match that. And so after she was a little bit older, I was able to leave my position as a nurse, to take care of her because she needed more intensive care at home. And honestly, it was God just kept on opening doors. I got involved with a lady by the name of Rose, from the Lafayette area, and she was very active with Indiana Health Choice Coalition. And there was just a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, and it's just like God kind of lined it all up perfectly for me. And she said, "Ashley, I want you to help me, kind of lead. There needs to be a movement here." And I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm doing," but I was just so frustrated and feeling like it was being laid on my heart at that time that I had to do something. And so somebody had posted in one of the groups that I was in about this FACL class, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't know a whole lot about politics, and I was like, I need to learn something. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm used to being the expert. People come to me for help. I am, I don't like to not know what I'm doing. So I'm going to this class thinking it's going to be like a high school government econ class, right? And really, it's funny because the night before, my best friend had come over, and she asked me in February to help clean out her grandpa's barn. And I said, I'm supposed to go to this class. I think it's going to be a waste of my time. I'll probably leave there around 10 o'clock. I was actually planning on leaving at the 10 o'clock break. And then it was quite a drive. I drove an hour for this class that I thought I was going to leave. Okay. Don't even know what made me go. I really don't, other than just God. Like, that's all there is. So, I made plans to meet up with her for lunch and then go clean out grandpa's barn. And 10 o'clock hit and I was like furiously taking notes, and I was like teacher's pet and just so into it because I felt for the first time hope and the hope and change, right? I felt that I had an opportunity to do something and I could actually be effective at it. By nature, I'm a very confrontational person. Like, it's not that I'm trying to be mean. I just want to figure out what's going on and I want to fix it. And that is just my personality. And if you've ever taken a FACL course, it just fits very well. And so it was just love at first sight with FACL.
So you really went to that by yourself?
There was 2 other people that I didn't know. I had met the one girl one time, and we were kind of loosely trying to form some sort of organization to fight back against vaccine mandates, because I think just prior to that, there was all the big hoopla about the measles outbreaks and Samoa and all that. And we're like, they're going to come for our exemptions. And at that time, my children were in public school. And so I had to do something, so that's just kind of how that all, I met the girl once. There was another person who was for medical liberty. We met that day. And actually both of those people are on the board for Hoosiers for Medical Liberty.
Okay. So you're at the FACL class, which stands for Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership. You're at the class, you get revved up, you become the teacher's pet.
Totally.
Then what happened? What happened when you went back home? What happened next?
Yeah, so it was an hour drive to that class. And so the whole way home, like, I called my friend Rose, who really was a huge part of this. I mean, I would not probably be here, or I wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been for her. But I called her up and just kind of gave her all the details. I called my best friend and I was like, I am so sorry, but you're never going to believe this. And she thought I was totally joking when I called and canceled on her. Like, she thought I was kidding. And I'm like, no, seriously, like, I'm not going to show up. So don't meet me for lunch. Like, I'm not coming. So I had to give her all the details, but I came home and sat down on the couch, and I think my husband probably thought I lost my mind. But I was so energized, and I knew I wasn't going to sleep that night. But that was, I think, February 2nd. It was either the 1st or the 2nd. And then February 8th, I made an appointment and met with a friend who's an attorney and started filing paperwork for a nonprofit.
Yeah. Which is today Hoosiers for Medical Liberty.
Yep.
So that was in February.
Of 2020. Mm-hmm.
Bring us to this session. What happened between, forming the organization and then coming on the scene at the state capitol?
Yeah. So I drug my feet. I won't lie. Like, I didn't want to do this. And I just kept on telling God, I'm like, listen, and I'm kind of sassy, and God deals with it very well. He loves me so much. I'm one of those children. But I'm like, look, if I'm doing this, you're going to have to give me the right people at the right time. And it's just going to have to work out, because I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't like to not be like in the know. So, I had some difficulties getting a website and trying to figure out all these things that are totally out of my wheelhouse. I'm not tech savvy. It's just not something that I'm interested in, and trying to figure out all the moving pieces and not get myself in legal trouble, because even though I am kind of sassy, I do like to do things the right way. I'm very type A personality. Like, I like to do things by the book. But what had happened is, again, my friend Rose, she texted me and she's like, hey, so-and-so had started working with the legislator. They got a meeting and now they don't think that they can do this and they're backing out. So would you want to join this other friend and I in this meeting. And I was like, well, I got to learn somehow, if we're really going to make this happen with this nonprofit, then we've got to figure it out. Right. And so it was Indiana for Medical Freedom and Indiana Health Choice Coalition and myself that went to this meeting, and it happened to be with Senator Cruz, and we had all known each other. We don't live in close proximity, but we had gotten on a couple Zoom calls and stuff like that and chatted about kind of what our plan was, and we came up with the language for the worker, what we called the Worker Protection Act, which would have been SB 74. We met with Senator Cruz. He was willing to move forward with that. Got that drafted and on, and we just kind of worked our way through trying to build support for that bill within the legislature, meeting with different senators, so that way we could have some support and hopefully move it, because we knew this was going to be super controversial. This is an uphill battle. We felt like we had a lot of good things going for us because of the fact that in 2020, we had seen the flu vaccine mandated outside of healthcare, and that had not happened before. And then we knew that the COVID vaccine was coming. And so, again, perfect timing. God put all those pieces into place. I had known, I met Kurt at that FACL class, and him and Mary and I had some good conversations. And I know that we were a pretty good fit, but I really didn't have any idea of anything. I mean, totally making it up as we went. And I'm so glad that I got to meet Kurt, because I mean, he is probably the most underestimated person in the Indiana government. I mean, I'm so thankful. I cannot say how much I appreciate his diligence in making things happen. And he told me, I said, we've talked to Senator Cruz and he's willing to run this bill. He said, great, no problem. Let me know if you need some things shaken up. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, okay, thanks, buddy. Like, and I found out what that means. He was pretty amazing, especially him and John both were just such a delight to work with. And we wouldn't have had some of the success that we had this year if it weren't for them. But, the other two organizations and I continued to work on this bill with Senator Cruz and try to really get things going there. And unfortunately, we didn't, but we definitely made a pretty big impact there in the Senate.
So let's delve into this just a little bit deeper. A lot of people get involved in politics and think they have influence when you develop friendships with politicians. So here you are meeting with Senator Cruz, not Ted Cruz, but Cruz from Indiana. And you're developing a relationship. It's a warm relationship. He's committing to do this. But at some point, I know this, at some point you turned the corner and became what we might call more confrontational rather than trying to be a friend to everybody. You wanted them, in a sense, FACL would say, you wanted them to fear you and to fear your organization. So tell us how you did that. Not necessarily the transition so much, but what did you and your organization do that caused such a commotion that came moving the ball further down the field, let's say?
Yeah. So this is all something that for me comes very naturally, because as long as scary, right? As long as we are working in the right direction and you keep your word to me, we're going to be just fine. And thankfully, Senator Cruz, he really did stick to his word. Now, we had met with Senator Boots, and I wasn't really, I rely on my intuition a lot, and I wasn't really comfortable with him. And I didn't even really want him to sign on as the main author because I was afraid he would just toilet it, right? But he ended up doing that later on his own. And I'm thinking we can probably guess as to why he did that now. But basically, I started out, first of all, by being very direct. When you're in politics, don't beat around the bush. Tell them exactly what you want and then stick with it. Okay. That's a pretty hard concept, that last part, sticking to it, because a lot of people don't want to. As soon as you start meeting any, oh, Ashley, I just don't know that we can do that. That's a big ask. No, it's not a big ask. This is my liberty. These are my rights. People deserve a choice. I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I'm just trying to assure that these people have the right to accept or decline a vaccination based on the information that they have gathered. Okay. I'm not taking anything away from anybody. So when you start getting that pressure, because if you're effective as FACL teaches, you will get that pressure and they will use that list of 7 phrases. Well, I heard almost every single one of those. And in some conversations, I heard multiple, that's just not how we do things around here, or you're not being reasonable. We need to take this in small. Oh, okay. You know what? I'm not going to listen to you anymore when you use that kind of language. You can be honest with me and give me what I want, or I'm going to make sure that I use my big mouth and tell everybody what you're doing. And so your conscience better be clean, because if it's not, they're going to come after you. I'm not the scary one. It's your voters. They're the scary ones. And so I just made sure that the constituents and the people knew what was going on, and they took care of the rest. They made those phone calls. And at one point we had Senator Booth's phone ringing every minute, and he was not very happy. So.
All right. So now let's go forward just a little bit faster. There was a time I heard that they asked you to compromise, like, we will do this if you will give up this. So now help us understand what you faced at that moment.
So there was actually a couple times, and the first time was not very direct. We had the bill was heard in January, and Senator Cruz called me very shortly thereafter and said basically they wanted to strip it down to, COVID only, under emergency use authorization, no penalties, nothing. So they wanted to strip the bill down to like bare minimum. I mean, no coverage at all, right? And I said, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to get rid of everything in there. And he did a great job standing with it. And he was very clear that he wanted to keep the word conscience in there because he felt that that was important. And so those were kind of some conversations that we had. And the bill had to have teeth. If it's not going to protect people and there's no way to enforce it, it's pointless. Right now, we have Indiana legislation that says that certain healthcare workers can be exempt from the flu vaccine for any reason. They can just say, I don't want it. But yet these hospital systems are denying that. They're putting people through religious challenges and everything else. And that irritates me. That is not appropriate. You're not following the law. But there is no penalty within that code. And people aren't standing up to it. So they just get away with it. And this is how our rights are slowly just being whittled away. And I'm not going to stand for that. I'm just not going to do it. So I just had to look and make a decision. Am I willing to compromise now and probably get nothing? And I took a lot of heat from this, even from some of my own people. They were angry with me for not just caving at this very first step because they were afraid we were going to lose it. And we did. But I don't think they would have ever given us anything at that point anyways. I mean, the amendments would have just completely stripped down the bill to a pointless piece of trash. So that was very difficult, but it's just a matter of knowing your principles and knowing where you stand. And I will say there were several times where I'm sitting at, this is my kitchen table, I'm sitting at my kitchen table crying because, and I'm not a crier, I'm not a very, like, if I'm going to get emotional, I'm probably going to get angry and loud. Crying is not my thing. But I'm sitting here at the table crying and not knowing what to do. And it was really just leaning back into that relationship, not only with God, but with those people that he had given me in Dan and Amy and Kurt, because I would be so flustered and frustrated. And they don't like that I say this, but I'm totally going to say it. I call Dan and Kurt my political fathers. And they're not old enough to be my dads, but they really stepped up and just gave me the encouragement and the support that I needed, because you have to understand, legitimately, I had never been to the IGA website prior to October of 2020. Okay. I know nothing. I am completely walking by faith, what I learned in that FACL class, and then going back and getting more information from Dan and from Kurt and saying, Amy, oh my gosh, what did I do? Why did I do this? Like, this is not an easy road to walk, but thankfully God answered my prayer. Remember, I said, give me the right people at the right time. And I got those people in Dan, Kurt, Amy, and then John I got introduced to a little bit later, but that's been a huge blessing.
Very good. So on this one topic, which is the bill that would have prevented employers from mandating vaccines.
Employers still could have mandated it. They would have just had to respect an exemption based on religion or on rights of conscience. Mm-hmm. So they could still mandate it. They could still require it. Employees would be able to fill out a form and say, hey, no thanks. And that would have to be legally respected.
Mm-hmm. So right now, obviously, that doesn't exist. Mm-mm. If a company wanted to mandate it, either work here or you don't work here is really the point. Okay, so do you view your work on that topic as a failure?
I mean, we didn't get policy, so on technicality, some would probably consider that a failure. But in the scheme of things, no. We definitely made our presence known. The Indiana State Legislature, especially the Senate, knows that Hoosiers for Medical Liberty and all the people that support us are not messing around. And I made a promise to them that I would be back next year. And I remember very distinctly, I got on the elevator and I may have gone to the basement instead of the main floor to leave. But on walk, 2 senators, and one of them looks at me and goes, oh, there's trouble. And I had mask on. I was like, who, me? No. And Senator Boots was the second one that walked on. And he just looked at me and just did not want to be in the same proximity as I was. And I made a very good impression on him at that point. So I will definitely be back for more next year. And I know that people are pretty upset because now that they failed to provide protections, that was their failure. They killed it, not ours. We did everything we could to make it happen. So now that they have failed to provide protections to employees, we are seeing where employers are mandating these vaccines. One of the things that they said was that we had federal protections in the way of religious exemptions that would provide protection. And that is proving, as I told them, not to be true. These are not being respected, and we're facing a lot of issues. If people have questions on that, they can absolutely visit the site under the resources tab, and we are working with people to help protect their rights there. Okay, so give us the link. What is the site? You can either do HoosiersForMedicalLiberty.com or H4ml.org. Okay, so now let's talk about your successes in addition to creating fear. Yeah, well, okay. I'm sure with some of these successes, they really felt some pain and fear. So what are the legislative successes that you look back on and see that you were somehow a part of that? Yeah, so Kurt was a champion for sure, without a doubt. And we did some amendments, and John got mixed in really quickly because there were some times where Kurt maybe wasn't available or had other things going on, and I did not really write down because they both were like tag teaming it, and it was awesome. So John and Kurt are both huge parts of both of these successes. But House Bill 1229 was a bill that was out regarding influenza or the flu vaccination administration dates. So it would have lengthened the flu season, and hospitals would have had to have provided the flu vaccine for an extended period of time. And it also would have required hospitals to collect the information on what staff members declined the vaccination, the flu vaccination. And so we went ahead and we wrote an amendment on there that would help. Gosh, I can't even remember what the amendment, I think it was about informed consent. We ended up killing that bill because they didn't want to address the amendment that I think it was Kurt placed on that bill. And so that was quite a success because of the fact that it just helped minimize the stress and discrimination on those employees declining the vaccination. And then we worked on SB 47, which was it would add COVID-19 vaccinations to the list of vaccinations that pharmacists could provide. And for me, it's not that I know 100% that pharmacists are wonderful resources. As a nurse, I use the pharmacists a lot more than what one would imagine because they have such a good knowledge base. And it's not that I question whether they're qualified, but we really need to have vaccinations being given with the provider, with their doctor, because they have that patient relationship. They know the history. They're able to follow that patient. If there is a negative consequence or outcome that happens, that physician is going to see that, recognize that, and follow up on that. So really believe that we shouldn't have vaccinations being given outside of that primary care type role. But we went ahead and added a couple different amendments onto that bill that would, number one, require informed consent. And this is huge because informed consent doesn't really happen. They don't really present all the information. And especially with the coronavirus vaccinations, these are experimental medications. They do not have full approval of the FDA, and they won't until 2023-ish. That could change. So that informed consent piece is really important. But we actually killed SB 70 or 47 too, because they didn't want to address the amendments that John and Kurt were putting forth. Because they were good, hard-hitting amendments that would actually do some really good things. And so that's really disappointing to watch these legislators kill good legislation, whether that's because they don't want John and Kurt to be right, or if it's because they don't want proper informed consent, or a combination of those two things. I'm not sure, but that was, to me, a huge success. If we could have gotten policy, we would have had some amazing, beautiful policy on that bill. But I think at least that was a big disruption to the fact that they're not going to just be able to create a lineup and further bury pharmacists in this work.
Okay, so then comment on what happened on Wednesday of last week when the session was supposed to end and it got postponed till the next day. But both houses passed the amendment for no passport vaccines, no vaccine passports. So was that something that got in by John or Kurt, or did you have a role in that?
It was the three of us. If we would not have worked collaboratively together, we had amendments on two different bills in regards to vaccine passports. And there was so much pressure from John and Kurt that they went ahead and tried to do another amendment, and we watched that play out where Representative Barrett, I think, brought an amendment up and got ruled out of order. And it was a dog and pony show. He did not believe in what he was saying. It was difficult for me to watch because couldn't believe I just couldn't believe it. It was very difficult. Um, but that got ruled out of order, and they actually killed a different bill regarding criminal penalties. So John couldn't get up, and we had a germane, which means it fit in with the bill. We had a really good amendment on that, and they killed that. We hammered them. I mean, my friends, my Hoosiers for Medical Liberty people, were calling like crazy and hammering the legislature because they wanted to see protections from passports. So what they did at the very last minute, I mean, they slipped this little amendment in, and unfortunately, it doesn't provide a whole lot of protections because it is just in regards to vaccinations. And the amendments that Kurt and John were bringing forward were not only for vaccination, but for invasive testing. And we're seeing that to be very important because with these vaccine passports, they're not only including your vaccination status, but they also want you to get a nasal swab or whatever to prove that you don't have active COVID. And some of these tests may or may not be accurate. And so it's very interesting. And we're seeing in other states that concert venues are requiring the vaccination status or the negative test and things like that. And I think one of the real dangers to that, aside from restricting the free movement of the people, is that's kind of a false sense of security, right? Oh, I had a COVID test. Even though I have a fever and I'm sick, I'm negative. And it takes away that sense of personal responsibility of when you're sick, you stay home. Oh, it's not COVID. I can go out and do whatever I want. Well, COVID's not the only thing that makes you sick. So I think that's a big risk. And then the fact that creating segregation, we are headed for a slippery slope. Or we're on a slippery slope, I guess, because how long is it going to be? I got kicked out of Menards for not wearing a mask. Well, you can shop, but you can't check out. I'm like, really? Okay. Like there's no sense to it whatsoever. And so how long is it before we're getting told at the grocery store, well, if you don't have your vaccinations, then you can't come shop. You have to order your groceries through our online service, and we're going to charge you $10. That's the kind of thing that I'm worried about. And in the legislation that they passed, it only prevents government from instituting it. Well, we're not going to see that. I can almost guarantee it, just because the fact that then they will just go on full blast calling them Nazis, which would be, appropriate. The government shouldn't be restricting the movement of people. So.
Yeah. Okay, so that is what I've been thinking. Your organization is really not about stopping vaccines.
Right. I don't want to take anything.
Describe what it is you're trying to do.
I do not want to take anything away from anybody. I simply want to make sure, as a nurse, in caring for you, if you were to come to me with a problem, I would say, okay, well, let's look at your options. And I would list out, let's just pretend 3 options. And I would go through option A. And this is what option A looks like. This is the risk. This is the benefits. This is how this works. This is option B. And I do the same thing. And then option C. You as an individual may make a different choice based on religion, personal experience, family history, quality of life. If I get cancer, I don't want chemo. I'm 36 years old. I don't want to travel that path. I watched my mom die as the result of radiation and all sorts of nasty treatments. I don't want to live my life like that. But if you talk to my neighbor, she may be like, yeah, give me all the chemo. We have different reasons for making choices. And it's important that we understand what we're getting into before we do it. And unfortunately, in today's society, there's a lot of talk about anti-vaxxers. And I will tell you, first of all, I don't like that term. I think it's very derogatory. I'm not going to get mad at you if you call me an anti-vaxxer. I might roll my eyes a little bit, but um and vaccine hesitant is the word that they're replacing. And again, that's not what I am. If I thought that it was safe, if I thought that the benefits of that treatment outweighed the risks for my family, I would 100% do it. I, from all of my knowledge and all of my research, that is not what I have found to be right. And I have what's called bodily autonomy, innate rights to decide what happens to my body, given to me by God, not by government, not by man, by God, the right to choose what happens to my body. And so that is the foundation of our organization. And in working in healthcare, unfortunately, I saw how this information, a lot of information, is being withheld. Vaccines have no liability. You cannot sue the manufacturer if they harm you. And why is that? Well, that's because back in the 80s, the manufacturers said, hey, listen, Congress, either you provide us with some protection or we're going to stop making these vaccines because we're being sued too much. People are getting injured and we're getting sued. And so Congress made the Act of 1986, and they said vaccines are unavoidably unsafe. And so you can no longer sue a vaccine manufacturer. You have to go through vaccine court or the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. And it's a quasi court. It's not even really court, and you can try your case, but they're not responsible for that at all. The money that is paid out, which is like over $4 billion and probably much higher than that now, is collected by a tax on each vaccination. And so there's so much injury that they're taking a portion of the money they collect for each vaccination and putting it in a bank so they can pay it out to injuries. People have the right to know when there is a risk involved. Period.
Yeah. All right. So this is a big project that you've undertaken. And what came to my mind when you were speaking earlier is we have, whether it's Senator Cruz or Kurt Nisley, John Jacob as representatives, those are the people who are there with their names on a bill. And it's people like you and Amy and others who are often thinking of these ideas and interacting with the legislators. But if that's where it ended, it wouldn't get done. So what you've talked about and illustrated is that the real power are in people under you who make those phone calls. So maybe speak to that, I don't know, strategy or group of people. I mean, it's coming fresh to me that none of this would have happened in your story if you didn't have an organization, if we could call it that, a group of people who don't necessarily meet with the representatives, but play the most important part.
Yeah, it's absolutely about the people. And I think, you know, me 2 years ago, as you said, I might have made a call, but I would have thought it was a waste of time and been kind of frustrated, like, why are you asking me to do this? But what people don't understand is when they are feeling that pressure, when they are getting all those phone calls, they have no choice but to listen, because you've just taken their aid and tied them up and they cannot work for them. So they get behind and that makes them angry. So by having a group of people, and what I have done is I do use email a little bit, but text messaging, people that want to follow us and support our cause can sign up for text messages, and I send out text blasts, and I make it, because that's the other aspect of it. When you do something on Facebook, you have to like copy the phone number down, and it's difficult and annoying. And when I do my text messages, the people can legitimately pick up their phone and tap on a phone number and say, "Hi, Senator Snort," as Dan would say. I'm really upset about this whole vaccine passport issue. I need you to do something about it now. I give people the appropriate people to call. Of course, calling your own legislators is always important. And then I also give them a short phrase, so that way they can do it really quickly and effectively, because I want people to feel empowered. I want to take some of the anxiety out of it and help them feel more comfortable in playing their role in government, because that's what it is. This is what we should be doing. If we don't communicate with our legislators, we aren't going to get our desired results. And so that's one big thing that I like about FACL is it gives you hope that yes, we can indeed make change, but it also kind of teaches you how to move within the system, and that yes, these things do work when applied in the right fashion. And luckily for me, I don't know why I feel very blessed, but I have this core group of people who trust me. They trust that I'm going to do right by them and do right for medical liberty. And so when I just say, "Hey, I need this done," they take it and run with it. And it's because of those people that they get those text messages, they follow up on those email calls to action. The legislatures aren't going to listen to me. I mean, I like to think that I'm pretty mean and tough, but I can't actually cause them bodily harm. That's just not really going to work. But if I can activate their voter base and show them this angry mob of people that will vote them out the next election cycle, that's really motivating. So,
Right. Okay, I'm going to try something different. So I'm going to share my screen.
sure.
This out. And I don't know that you would have ever had a chance to see this diagram. Okay, so I want you to look on the left side. And I want to ask, 2 years ago, would it have been your understanding that we, the people, are in charge of our government? Or would you have thought perhaps that the government was in charge of us?
100% government makes the rules, and I can't change it.
Yeah. So now through FACL and through your experience, would you agree? I'm not trying to lead you, but would you agree that the left side is really the way our Constitution is?
Yeah.
Nice?
Yeah, I wish I could find more people that believe that, honestly. And that's why it truly has been a personal mission for me to bring, my goal was to bring 6 to 10 FACL classes, the basic class, to Indiana for this exact purpose, because I want to wake people up and help them realize that they do have the power. Like, you really do have the power. You just have to assert yourself.
And so really it's understanding we, the people, and what that means, which has really given you the confidence to, I'll say it funny, to be as mean as you are with these representatives. And the point is, if we could get more people understanding that it's really our responsibility as voters to manage our government rather than to be managed by our government, we could get a lot more done. And we need those people, even just in Indianapolis, to understand that they're not in charge, that we're in charge. Is that part of what you're trying to communicate?
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. I call it my tough love speech, my come to Jesus speech. Because it really, people have to understand that your rights can't be taken away from you. God gave you those rights. The government didn't. Our government was designed to protect us and to promote our freedom. Those people didn't come to America for fun and didn't, throw the big fit to break away from England because they just thought it would be entertaining. It was over the religious freedom and, asserting themselves and taking their rights back, because they knew God gave them these abilities, these rights, these fundamental rights. And they did really do a great job. And I never would have thought this if it hadn't been framed out the way it was by FACL. and the way that that was kind of explained. And so we have to move from this sense of the government's here and they're here to help, to that whole taking accountability, communicate, know who I didn't. Okay, embarrassing. I met Jason Arp. I didn't know that he was my city councilman. I didn't know.
We'll keep that between us.
Yeah, whatever. I told him, I was honest. I'm not afraid to be, I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong, but I'm usually not. So, it's just one of those things. Like I didn't know who my state representative was. I didn't know who my senator was. I didn't know how all that worked. So I had to learn all of this stuff very quickly. And as I went, and that's very humbling. Like, and again, that's why I kept on going back to God and saying, look, I'm doing this for you, but I need help. Like, send me, a person with these qualities. And he always has. So.
All right. So we're going to wrap up, and I assume you use more people helping you, right?
Always.
Yeah. So in my YouTube description, I will put the website again. You've already named it. We'll put some links there for people. But let's transition one last topic that I'm going to post this first on a prayer page, and it's called the Nicely prayer page. So we have almost 190 people who are members of that page, with maybe 70, 80, 90 pretty active. What would you like to say to them from your perspective as you're speaking to a group of people that are praying for you and others?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for that. There are a lot of times when this does get very difficult, and I cannot imagine being in Kurt, John, or Dan's position. I know from an outside perspective, we definitely need those prayers. We definitely appreciate those prayers for a clear mind, for direction, for guidance, and knowing that we are making good decisions and going at things in a holy way. Because sometimes when you're being mean, it can be difficult, and you can feel like a bad person. There is that guilt that goes with it. And so making sure that we are staying on that path of righteousness, I think, is a big thing. And feeling comfortable and at peace with that.
Super. Hey, Ashley, thanks so much for what you've done. You have a very inspiring story. Thanks for working so hard. And this is a huge thing for your family. I mean, this is not just you, it's your children and your husband supporting you, right?
Yeah, this has been really tough on my family. People think that like it's a Facebook post here and there, and it's not. It's a lot of long nights. It's a lot of stress. It's, mommy, I haven't seen you today. Like, are you going to be home? And it's also loading the kids up and taking them down to Indianapolis. We live 2 hours away. It's definitely been interesting, but I am really thankful because my kids are getting an insane education in how government works, and to stand up for what you believe in, and you don't fall in the face of fear or strife. There have been so many things where I just sit with my hands in my head, like, this is not my thing. This is not something I wanted to do. And how do I figure out how to make a web page, or how do I, like, this techie stuff is not my deal. And the girls have gotten to see all of that. And it's been pretty amazing. It's been tough, but it's been a huge blessing to them as well, to see true strength and perseverance that sometimes you don't realize you have in you.
So I'm going to go ahead and share this. I'll be 64 this year. My mom is 93. So we're going to hopefully see her next week. We fly out to California, be with her for Mother's Day. When I was growing up, I was at a generation in California that they experimented the school system and did not use phonics. Okay. So it was rote memory. So my mom was telling the teachers how that wasn't going to work. Of course, they thought they were smarter. And then when I got to high school, our city built a new high school. And at that time, they were experimenting with open learning. So there were no doors on the classrooms. You could sit in one class and look down and see several other classes. So today, if you go back to California, they are teaching phonics to elementary age kids, and my high school all has doors. Okay. And my mom was all over the teachers. Every opportunity that something would come up. I was in, she said to me last year, she said, do you remember what that was about when I was pretty upset with Dr. Chan, or Mr. Chan, I think was his name? I said, I don't really remember. She said, what he was doing in your social studies class was dividing the class members into groups and having them work on family budgets, but some people were assigned a same-sex marriage. And this was like 1974 in California. And she was in the principal's office, all this stuff. I don't think it probably changed anything, but the point is, I'm involved today. And much like you, there was a time, 2013, when I didn't know anything. I wasn't involved in anything. And someone asked me to get involved in Kurt Nicely's campaign. But the point is, my mom ingrained that image in me of actually doing something instead of just talking about something. And that's going to have a really big impact on your kids. And my mom never really taught me anything other than she demonstrated how to engage and try to change things. So.
Yeah, and this is a story for another day. But sometimes my kids will ask why I'm doing this. And my grandpa actually was in Auschwitz
Wow.
as a young boy. And so for me, it is very difficult to watch some of this stuff happen. And, you know, I just go back to that. I will not let that happen. No, sorry. My family lived through it once. It's not happening on my watch.
Yeah, right.
So.
Right. All right. That's a great way to end. Very much. We'll look forward to what happens next. Are you going to be at this FACL class on the 15th?
Yeah, I'm hosting that class.
Oh, okay.
So a plug for FACL real quick.
Yeah.
There's May 15th in Fort Wayne. There is rumors I heard of one in Maryville, but I'm not sure what's going on there. I think maybe they had some venue issues. And then there are two, one in Goshen and one in Anderson on June 19th. And if anybody wants help setting up a FACL class or has questions, Dan is an amazing resource. I also would be happy to explain kind of what I did. I've only spent a couple hours. This is my second class that I've helped host. And so it's super easy. They send the trainer, they pay for everything. It's a great organization. You just have to have the people, the food, and the location. So I really do encourage around the state, please get in contact with somebody and get one set up in your area.
So this is Friday, the 30th at about 4:04. Do you have any guess as to how many people will be there on the 15th?
Right now, I think we're probably just over 30.
Wow.
I think we can hold 60.
Wow.
The Liberty movement is like, just, you can feel the energy in Indiana. People are fed up. We've exposed a lot of the corruption, and again, tough love. We need to be responsible for communicating, and they have to do the right thing. Okay.
Yeah.
If they decide that they want to do the right thing, great. I won't have to be me.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of fun sometimes, but I'd prefer not to have to be. So just make the right decisions, guys, and we'll be good. But we got to get them to that point where the tables have turned. We need a few more Kurt and Johns down there.
Okay. Hey, have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.